Human Rights and Relations Commission. We'll start with our roll call. Lindy?
Commissioner Arsenault?
Here.
Commissioner Bigby?
Here.
Commissioner Davis?
Here.
Commissioner Kennedy?
Here.
Commissioner Sanders?
Here.
Chair Seidman?
Here.
Commissioner Winnick?
Here.
Commissioner Gates?
Here.
Commissioner Weinert?
Here.
Okay. Next is the approval of the meeting agenda. Are there any additions, subtractions, or modifications to the meeting agenda?
Yes, I'd like to add the affordable housing discussion referred to at item E to be added to the agenda.
Okay, so that would be
So
section 7E, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve the modification?
I so move.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Motion moved. Thank you, Steve. Next is the approval of the October 28, 2014 meeting minutes. Are there any modifications or revisions to the meeting minutes? Okay. Seeing none, I'll take that as a motion to approve. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. The October 2014 meeting are approved. Community comments. I see people in the audience, but I think we have a speaker and her person with her, so we're good for tonight. Thank you. Next up, we do have a guest speaker here, and I know that Commissioner Kennedy knows her well and will introduce her.
I'm pleased to introduce our very special guest, Ms. Christy Nickerson. Christy is the Program and Operations Director at World Without Genocide, a human rights organization headquartered at William Mitchell College of Law in St. Paul. She coordinates educational programs about genocides and other atrocity crimes and works on legislation and policy to advance social justice locally and globally. She is also the program manager for Forward Global Women. This organization, founded and directed by Minnesota Senator Sandy Pappas, brings together women leaders from the Middle East, North Africa, and the U.S. to address issues of peace and to focus on advancing women's rights. Finally, Christy is part of a national network of emerging leaders called the Carl Wilkins Fellows. In this position, she raises awareness about food and environmental crises that can lead to discrimination and violence. Christy is a graduate of the University of Minnesota, where she majored in global studies. In September 2015, she will begin a master's program at the University of Uppsala in Sweden. She received a Rotary Peace Fellowship, similar to a Rhodes or a Fulbright Scholarship, to pursue her studies in peace and conflict resolution. We welcome you, Christy.
Thank you. Good evening, Commissioners. I'm honored to be here tonight with all of you speaking about human rights, particularly the day after International Human Rights Day. I myself am deeply committed to issues of human rights. I advocate for an end to genocide, support women's rights, and promote environmental justice to help build peace. Through my work with nonprofits, grassroots organizers, and government officials, I've seen the importance of international laws and standards, and I'm committed to seeing them implemented by local governing bodies and committed individuals. Yesterday was International Human Rights Day, marking the anniversary of the signing of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. I join you today to discuss this declaration, which is an international set of standards. It lays out the baseline of rights that we as global citizens have decided that all people deserve. World War II devastated the planet. Buildings and entire cities and towns were left in ruins, as you see in this picture of Germany. Farmland had been destroyed, millions of people had been killed, and many more were left in desperate conditions. The Holocaust and years of war had scarred many countries. 70 years ago, at the time of war, there was no clear agreement or understanding about basic human rights. We had Hammurabi's Code, the U.S. Bill of Rights, and the Magna Carta. These all set out basic ideas about rights, but there was no international standard. After World War II, the United Nations was formed to promote cooperation between governments. It replaced the League of Nations and was established as a direct result of the war. The founding members were committed to preventing other global atrocities like those that had ravaged the planet during the war. President Franklin Roosevelt was a preliminary supporter and founder of the body. The UN was the first international governmental organization to receive significant support from the United States. Pictured here is the UN headquarters in New York. When it was founded in 1945, there were 51 member states. Today, there are 193 members. The UN was built on land donated by John D. Rockefeller. Although it is situated in New York City, the UN headquarters and other buildings are not under U.S. administration. They're located on extraterritorial land per an agreement with the U.S. government. The United Nations does, however, abide by local, state, and federal U.S. laws. When the UN was formed, human rights emerged as a primary agenda item. It was not a partisan issue, but a human issue. Human rights have champions on all political sides and at all levels. On December 9th, 1948, the UN body passed the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, which defined genocide in legal terms and made it a crime under international law. This was one of the very first human rights international conventions, rather than previous documents which had been humanitarian law. Humanitarian law is what governs war. It includes protections for wartime prisoners, wounded combatants, and civilians. The very next day, on December 10th, 1948, the UN passed the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. This document became what we consider to be a sort of international Bill of Rights. It sets the standards for other treaties and conventions. One of the key people who worked on UDHR was Eleanor Roosevelt. She was appointed by President Harry S. Truman as a delegate to the UN after her husband, President Roosevelt, died. She chaired a committee of 18 international representatives. She helped write parts of the text and lobbied international leaders to gain support. Ms. Roosevelt considered her work on the Declaration to be her greatest life accomplishment. She was determined that rights should be guaranteed to all people and in all aspects of their lives. On the committee with Ms. Roosevelt were many other internationally well-known individuals, including René Cassin of France and John Peters Humphrey of Canada, the principal author of the document. As you can see, other members of the committee came from Lebanon, the Soviet Union, China, the United Kingdom, Australia, and Chile. It was truly an international body. It's important to note that the Declaration is not law. It's not a convention or a treaty. No one can be held accountable legally under this declaration alone. Rather, it defines the words fundamental freedoms and human rights, and it's a tool that we can use to shape international policies. Many countries have adopted the Declaration or use it to influence their national constitutions. It serves as the foundation for a growing number of international treaties and for national laws. Many international lawyers also take the Declaration to be customary law. Customary law means that it's accepted as a sort of international social norm or a human standard. It's at the center of shaping international relations. The UDHR is therefore used as a powerful tool in applying diplomatic and moral pressure to governments that violate any of its articles. The Declaration is composed of a preamble and 30 articles. The rights enshrined in the Declaration protect our most basic freedoms. They promote dignity, fairness, and equality. They enable all people to meet their basic needs, and they include civil, political, economic, and cultural rights. Articles 1 and 2 are the foundation blocks, with their principles in dignity, liberty, and equality. Article 2, for example, guarantees human rights to all people, regardless of their age, race, religion, or other status. Articles 3 through 11 constitute the rights of the individual. Article 4, for example, states that all people should be free from slavery. Slavery is alive and well today in many parts of the world. People are forced to work without pay and are held against their will. This can manifest as sex work, forced labor, human trafficking, debt bondage, and child marriage. The children pictured here are forced to labor in the fishing industry. Today, as many as 36 million men, women, and children are held in slavery. However, this is not just a problem overseas. It's a big problem here in the U.S. and here in Minnesota. Over 200,000 young people are trafficked within the United States each year, and that doesn't account for the tens of thousands of people who are brought into the U.S. from other countries. In Minnesota, at least 213 girls are sold for sex on an average of 5 times per day. This disproportionately affects Native American women, who are 3 times more likely to be sexually assaulted than their white counterparts. Articles 12 through 17 constitute the rights of the individual in civil and political society. For example, Article 16 guarantees the right to marriage and family. Only 18 countries in the world have guaranteed same-sex couple marriage. This includes Uruguay, South Africa, Canada, and many Western European countries. Minnesota is one of 35 states, plus Washington, D.C., that allow same-sex couple marriage in the United States. Articles 18 through 21 are concerned with spiritual, public, and political freedoms, such as freedom of religion and freedom of association. Within this category, Article 21 guarantees the right to participate in government and in free and fair elections. Around the world today, millions of people are denied this right. Many marginalized groups, including young people, non-citizens, minorities, homeless, and disabled people, lack access to vote in free and fair elections. Articles 22 through 27 set out social, economic, and cultural rights. Article 26, for example, specifies that all people should have access to an education. Today, about 17% of the world's population is illiterate. 2/3 of them are women. About 120 million young people are illiterate. Education is essential to promote voting, poverty eradication, and gender equality. Education is the key to social, political, and economic empowerment. Articles 28 through 30 are concerned with the duty of the individual to society and prohibit the use of rights in violation of the purposes set out by the United Nations. These articles state that everyone is entitled to the rights laid out in the document and to a social and international order. Rights shall be limited only for the purpose of establishing proper rights and respect for others. It guarantees that no government or person should act in any way that destroys the rights of others. As I mentioned, the UDHR is not a law. In order to give these standards legal weight, subsequent treaties have been passed. 2 binding covenants have come out of the Declaration, and those include the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights and the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. These 3 documents put together form what we call the International Bill of Rights. Each of these covenants has been expanded upon by subsequent international conventions and treaties, including the Convention relating to the status of refugees, the International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination, the International Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, the UN Convention Against Torture, and the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. These conventions are not technically part of UDHR. They expand on the ideals set out by the document. They are tools that give the document legal strength and power of enforcement. U.S. diplomats have been involved in drafting all of these documents. Most have been ratified by the majority of other UN member states. And there's growing support for the U.S. to ratify the documents that we have not yet supported. In the U.S., treaty ratification goes through a process called advise and consent. The President submits a treaty to the Senate, where it requires a 2/3 vote to be passed back to the President to sign. When the treaty is ratified, it becomes legally binding. The U.S. has ratified the UDHR and the UN Charter, the treaty that founded the United Nations. Key U.S. diplomats had important roles in drafting both of these documents. President Carter submitted the UN Charter to the Senate in 1977. The Senate ratified it in April of '92 and turned it back to the executive branch, where President Bush signed it in June of 1992. Most countries in the world have now ratified the Charter. The International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights includes the right to life, fair trials, and free elections, as well as the freedom of speech, religion, and assembly. 168 out of 193 countries have ratified this treaty. The U.S. has ratified with reservations, and this is a common ratification practice to align a treaty or convention with current U.S. law. The International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights includes labor rights and the right to health, education, and an adequate standard of living. 162 out of 193 countries have ratified this treaty. The U.S. has signed but has not yet ratified the treaty. Past presidential administrations have taken the view that the right to health, education, and a standard of living are desirable social goals that can be addressed by domestic bills. The International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination has been ratified by the U.S. with reservations. The U.S. right to freedom of speech contradicts provisions against hate speech laid out in this treaty. The International Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women has been signed but not yet ratified by the U.S. Only 8 countries have not ratified this treaty, including the U.S. However, it has increasing national support, including from many Minnesota organizations like the Advocates for Human Rights. The UN Convention on the Rights of the Child has been signed by the U.S., but not yet ratified. Virtually all articles in the convention have U.S. support, and it is expected that it will be presented to the Senate in the near future. This is the most widely and rapidly ratified human rights treaty in history. The U.S., Somalia, and South Sudan are the only 3 countries in the world that have not yet ratified this treaty. The U.S. has not yet taken any action on the UN Convention Against Torture and other cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment. The U.S. has the largest incarcerated population in the world, with over 2 million people behind bars, and is one of the few countries with no independent agency to monitor prison conditions or health and safety standards. U.S. objections to this treaty include claims that it would infringe on rights of states. We can look at the human rights laid out by this structure and the UDHR, in part with the other international treaties, as a framework to use and a target to strive to fill. The UDHR is an aspirational document. It does not hold any legal power or unilateral obligations. It does, however, hold enormous weight in international human rights, as it sets the bar for other treaties and is accepted as customary law. Multinational treaties give the Declaration grit. These spell out legal definitions and requirements. Signatories to these treaties are mandated to submit reporting. That means that when the U.S. ratifies a UN treaty, we are required to submit reporting that detail our successes, challenges, and further required action to fulfill the rights outlined. There are some major human rights challenges at this level. They include international goals of promoting education, controlling illegal trafficking of humans, drugs, and weapons, and the elimination of poverty. Next, we have domestic laws. These promote accountability within countries and ensure rights at a federal level. It's important for individual countries to ratify treaties and pass domestic laws because it holds countries to a universal standard and strengthens their national commitment to the promotion of human rights. Challenges at this level hone in on those we see at the international level. Countries may be better able to address the needs of their citizens than larger international governing bodies. For example, countries face issues with stateless people or refugees, as well as internationally displaced persons, education standards and accessibility, sanitation and health care, and other rights like free and fair elections, poverty and access to housing, and access to adequate and nutritious food. Each country is responsible for addressing these challenges in order to properly provide for and care for their citizens. Finally, we have local legislation. State and city laws are what we feel most immediately. Cities and states have different jurisdiction than nations. In the U.S., states have a great amount of autonomy. The U.S. has not granted freedom to marry to all people, but the state of Minnesota voted to allow marriage for same-sex couples. Policies on education, incarceration, voting, trade, and other issues can be handled directly at state and city levels. This is where people feel human rights most directly. The human rights laid out here affect them in their daily lives. Additionally, action can be taken here more swiftly and precisely. The Human Rights and Relations Commission responds to important issues as they arise here in the community. This commission exists in the innermost ring of human rights and has a direct impact on the people. Edina governing bodies can tailor their policies and procedures to best suit the unique needs of the citizens here in Edina. I suggest that by using the Universal Declaration of Human Rights as a framework, this commission has a tool to guide them in ensuring that all rights are secured for Edina citizens, employees, and students. As Eleanor Roosevelt so eloquently said, human rights begin in small places, close to home, so close and so small that they cannot be seen on any maps of the world. Such are the places where every man, woman, and child seeks equal justice, equal opportunity, and equal dignity without discrimination. Unless these rights have meaning there, they have little meaning anywhere. In small places, our rights must be realized at every level. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights was designed to address the needs of all people everywhere in the world. It was set out to protect people and guard their basic rights. However, each country has the obligation of realizing these rights and taking action to uphold them. Local governments hold the responsibility of addressing the immediate and long-term rights of their citizens as part of this global movement for human rights. Edina is one of those places. We must protect our rights not just in our courtrooms and the chambers of governing bodies, but at a local level, in our businesses, schools, and everyday lives. We all have the authority to demand these rights and to take action to protect and promote them. Thank you very much for having me here tonight. I believe the agenda has time for a few questions, if there are any from the commissioners.
Christy, first of all, I want to thank you for coming and presenting this topic to our commission, especially tonight. I know we have related topics to go along with it, but you've been with us before on other projects with us. So again, I want to thank you for presenting the information.
Thank you very much.
I have a question.
Sure.
We've had a number of portions of the Declaration that have not been signed by the United States. And I know 6 years ago when I first heard that was a bit disturbing. And it's 6 years later, and there's still sections that haven't been signed by the United States. What is it going to take? I mean, is there any idea that we've got progress being made, or is this a logjam, or ideological? What's happening?
I think absolutely there's progress being made. It takes a long time, as we know, to get things passed at a national level, which is why it's so important to pass such resolutions and bills at a local level, like in the city of Edina, because they have a more immediate impact and can be achieved more swiftly and precisely. On a national level, there's growing support for a lot of the treaties that we saw tonight and for international human rights standards. And I think groups in the U.S. are putting more pressure on our own government, and we're seeing support from our partners internationally to do the same as well. So we expect in the near future that some of the treaties we haven't seen, like the Convention on the Rights of the Child, will come into the spotlight again for the U.S. government to take another look at.
So you'll be able to prompt us and tell us what we can be doing to help further that, hopefully.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I have a question. I'm assuming that our Senators Klobuchar and Franken, would be generally sympathetic. Are there leaders in the United States Senate that we can look to from other states that would perhaps likewise share in leadership on these issues?
Right. Well, the U.S. has actually ratified the declaration. You're talking about individual treaties. I'm not sure of individual representatives or senators who are leading on international treaties. Some of the other commissioners might know better, but in general, we are seeing bipartisan support, which is great. So it's not typically partisan issues that we see come up so often. We're seeing that cross boundaries more, which is great. I can't name names tonight, unfortunately.
I have a question. Could you tell us, if you know, what are some of the objections that the U.S. has on the Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women? You mentioned some of the objections on some of the others, but could you share with us maybe some of the objections that U.S. might have on that one?
Sure. Two of the big ones are on maternal health and rights of the family, and so those mean different things to different groups, and it comes down to the type of language, I think, that we include in that. And the way that that can be interpreted.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you all very much.
Thank you again. I think next up we have Commissioner Kennedy on Human Rights City Designation.
Christy talked very eloquently about, about human rights and how all human beings are inherently entitled to those human rights. The words on this slide that you see about human rights are important. Words like universal, everyone, shared, and moral. However, we know that these rights are not indeed universal. All of these rights enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights apply to some people, but some people have none of these rights. These rights are lived at the local level in equal treatment regardless of race, sex, ethnicity, religion, in the freedom from torture and to live in safety, and with basic needs for food, shelter, and health to be met without fear, equality before the law, and rights to education, property ownership, and more. Christy quoted Eleanor Roosevelt's words about the necessity of bringing these rights into existence in our own neighborhoods and our own communities. In 2008, the United Nations, Harvard University, and the People's Movement for Human Rights developed the concept of the Human Rights Cities. This initiative uses the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the aspirations for those 30 freedoms included within it as the basis for cities to examine their own policies and procedures and to take action to enhance human rights in those small spaces. The concept has gained global support, with cities in 10 countries and 4 continents using the Universal Declaration of Human Rights as the guide to improving equity and equality. This map shows some of the places in the world where the human rights concept is currently being applied. This map of the United States shows with words some of the challenging human rights issues that we face in our own country. These words include discrimination that we know is manifested in many dimensions, voting rights, equality of all before the law, the situation in our prisons, fair wages, freedom to practice one's religion without persecution or discrimination, children's rights, and more. In 2013, at the United States Conference of Mayors, the mayors endorsed this idea of the human rights cities, and their statement of endorsement read as follows: "Be it resolved to explore opportunities to incorporate international human rights into local policy and practice, and to support broader efforts to advance human rights principles locally." Our mayor of Edina, whose picture is shown, Jim Hovland, participated in that conference and in its endorsement of human rights cities. So how does this idea become enacted? Cities use the Universal Declaration of Human Rights as a framework to engage first in participatory governance, bringing many stakeholders together to generate information about critical local concerns. This builds ownership and buy-in and representation over the process and the solutions. They find unique community-based solutions to address some of the problems shown in the words on that U.S. map: poverty, housing, equality in education and employment, and more. And the process brings human rights to those smallest spaces. Using the Universal Declaration of Human Rights as a guide, the Human Rights Cities process encourages representative groups to tackle local challenges and to respond at these local spaces. There are 5 cities or communities in the U.S. that have already undertaken this process, as you see on this slide. And these cities span the country, from Washington, D.C. to Oregon, and with various areas of specific focus that some of them have chosen, including housing and racism. Eugene, Oregon has chosen to work broadly, looking at all of the areas that Christy mentioned: civil, political, social, economic, and cultural rights. The designation of human rights city represents a process. It does not represent an outcome. So when I say that these are human rights cities, it does not mean that they have achieved human rights status. It means instead that they are engaged in the process of using the UDHR to move their cities forward. To be a human rights city is not then a designation. Just like the UDHR, it encourages us to reach for those highest goals, affirming that every human being will indeed have the access to those 30 fundamental rights that Christy reviewed. And even though we know that we are far from those steps as human beings on this planet, we know that since 1945, we have come a very long way. What our Human Rights and Relations Commission is advocating is that we engage in becoming a human rights city. And we've established the process that you see on the slide. This fall, we've established a steering committee, and that steering committee includes 2 commissioners, Commissioner Saunders and myself, and 2 Edina residents, both of whom were former members of this commission and who have a deep and long-standing commitment to human rights. In spring of 2015, we will look at what the critical issues are that have arisen from the Edina visioning process that was undertaken this fall and from the community conversations that began in November, so this past month, and that will continue this spring. Some of the issues that we've already heard about from Edina visioning and from community conversations include the needs of our aging population, ensuring acceptance for the increasing racial, religious, and ethnic diversity in our community, responding to housing and employment challenges, and understanding that there are unique needs that we face given that nearly 1 in every 5 Edina students receives free or reduced cost lunches. We will be guided by the concerns and the issues expressed by the people who live, work, and study in our city. We will create awareness throughout Edina about the human rights framework for local action, using many different educational and outreach strategies through 2015. We'll design a strategic plan this summer to address those issues that the Commission and the Steering Committee view as being the most significant and the most urgent to be addressed. And beginning in fall 2015, we will implement that strategic plan. This process includes evaluation and review as it goes forward, and we hope that it will expand over time to address challenges that allow us to strengthen our community and to prepare us well for the future. Why do this? As Eleanor Roosevelt said, without concerted citizen action to uphold human rights close to home, we shall look in vain to the larger world. Thank you. Are there questions?
Commissioner Kennedy, thank you very much. Next up on our agenda is the Days of Remembrance, Genocide Awareness. As many of you probably know, in 2011, an Edina resident came to us and asked if the city of Edina would present a program to remember survivors, liberators, and victims of the Holocaust. This will be our fourth year that we are presenting this program in Edina. It is Days of Remembrance. This year, the title is From Armenians to the Holocaust. It will be Sunday, April 19th, 2015, from 1 to 3:30 in Edina City Hall. Several topics or parts of the program will be standing up against genocide denial. We'll have Commissioner Kennedy speaking at that event. Also, we will have a guest speaker, a Holocaust survivor, Dora Iger Zeidenweber. Her statement is, and one of the reasons why we're giving this program is the Holocaust was a time of disregard for human rights and human life. Another part of that program will be Upstanders, Armenians who saved Jewish residents during the Holocaust. And it is a reader's theater play performed by World Without Genocide and high school students and college students. We hope at that time that we see people from our community, both from the schools, from the middle schools, public schools, high schools, teachers, from all walks coming to the event. It has become a popular event for people to learn about the Holocaust and all different populations that were impacted. Next up, we have Community Conversations Update with Commissioner Davis and Commissioner Bigby.
Thank you, Commissioner Seidman. I'm excited to report about this first working group that was created by the Human Rights and Relations Commission that I'm honored to co-chair with Commissioner Bigby. Our objective in this group is to gather community input in order to answer two questions. The first question is, what makes a welcoming community? And that means, what are the qualities and characteristics that make people feel comfortable and that they belong in that place? The second question then is Edina a welcoming community? To that end, we've created a diverse working group made up of 12 volunteer community members that range in age from 17 to 70. Among that diverse group are teachers, lawyers, homemakers, and one very engaged high school student. Our group will be answering these two questions through a series of conversations held around the community, open to all who wish to participate. We're calling them community conversations or listening sessions. A 30-year-old Minnesota nonprofit organization, the Advocates for Human Rights, provided 2 separate training sessions to all of our volunteers on how to host such community conversations, using a model that they found successful through a 2-year analysis of how the state of Minnesota respects and fulfills its human rights of refugees and immigrants. Our goal ultimately is to listen, to summarize, and report. So what we will do and have done is using a series of specific questions following a consistent format. We're collecting and documenting information about residents' experiences and their perception on a variety of issues in this community. We maintain the confidentiality, the identity of all of the participants. We're holding these sessions at various days and times in locations that are easily accessible. Our publicity has and will continue to center on areas of town that are more heavily populated by ethnically, racially, and culturally diverse residents. We've had 2 successful conversations in the month of November, and we plan to hold at least 4 more between now and the end of March 2015. Several members of the working group work together to facilitate each of the sessions. We've targeted the end of April 2015 to submit to the full commission our written summary of our findings and our conclusions. In the end, we will have gathered substantial information that can be used by the Human Rights and Relations Commission and others to ensure that Edina is a welcoming community with the potential to make a great place to live even better. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have Commissioner Winnick with the Tom Oy Award announcement and information.
Thank you. As many of you know, the Tom Oy Award is given annually. It is an award that is eligible for anyone who lives or works in Edina. Nominations are made by a written application form, and the nominator need not be a resident, nor need the nominator work in Edina. We should say something about Tom Oy. We're going to show you a PSA shortly where someone who knew Tom talks about him. He was a longtime resident of Edina. Listed on the screen are a number of the awards that he received. What's most significant, he was a Japanese American who was required to live in a camp as World War II broke out, and his response was to enlist as a soldier in the U.S. Army and served during World War II as a member of the famed 442nd Nisei Regimental Combat Team. It should be noted that it was one of the most decorated units in the entirety of U.S. military history. So it's not surprising that the selection criteria for this award would be persons whose efforts to foster respect, dignity for others, model courage, and compassion and advancement of human rights, those who demonstrate leadership by example for improving human relations and or advancing human rights. Our past winners include our own commission member, Dr. Ellen Kennedy, and I should note the award was presented to her long before she was a member of this commission. Rachel Greiner, an Edina High School counselor, well known to our student members. Joyce Repia of the Edina City Planning Office for her work in reconstructing the web page on the Edina website about the horrors and the difficulties that people found in the Country Club District by reason of the restrictive covenants, which were established in 1924 when the Country Club District was established. and Kristen Arsvold from the Edina Parks Department, along with recently retired Detective Tom McCarthy of the Edina Police Department, for their work that they've done with the emerging immigrant community in the Park Lawn neighborhood in Edina, and their attempts to introduce that community to some of the benefits that the city of Edina offers. This is an award that can be made for a number of reasons. It could be in the view of the nominator, it could be an extraordinary event, could be extended service, or it could be in the nature of a lifetime achievement award, depending upon whatever it is that the nominator feels would fit the selection criteria. Our commission acts as a selection body. We'll make that decision after debating it at our March meeting. My co-committee member Laura Davis and I have concluded that the recipient of the award may very well be an organization, especially a nonprofit organization or an organization that is committed to human rights and relations work. And the award is presented at Edina's Volunteer Recognition Dinner in April at the Bramer Clubhouse. As far as submission information, January 31st, 2015 is the deadline. The application form, can be found under our tab, Human Rights and Relations Commission, at the city's webpage. The information is on the screen. And for those of you who may wish to submit the application in hard copy rather than online, please feel free to contact staff at the telephone number shown on the screen. I think it's appropriate now for me to stop talking, and why don't we screen the public service announcement. This was made with Gene Sylvester, and I think it's self-explanatory, as Mr. Sylvester knew Tom Hoy well.
You know,
the gentleman who you see on the screen is a very interesting man. He served in World War II. As is shown, he was a consultant to the city of Edina back in the 60s, and it was in that connection that he worked with the predecessor to this commission. There actually were two commissions, Human Relations and Human Rights, and he was involved in the merger of those.
Tom, can you tell us how you became acquainted with him? Gene, you knew Tom. Can you tell us how you became acquainted with him?
Well, we met when he was there as the Human Rights Commission was first started. Right away, this very gentle, interesting person began to talk about this was an opportunity to get Edina talking with one another about human rights issues. He was Japanese American. After he got out of high school, he volunteered to serve in the Army. He was classified as 4C. He was known as an enemy alien and not eligible for service. However, there was a call that went out for putting together a special combat team, a regiment of men who would be assigned to different difficult situations coming up in the war. And he went to Italy, and he went to France, and he went to Germany. He comes back and he tells me and the rest of the people in this newly formed commission, you got to keep working on discussions between people or you end up like this. The work of human rights is never done. So each generation's got to go back in and face what it should be doing. And it's a struggle.
Thank you.
I was just going to say, Steve, I just want to thank you again for taking the time to make that public service announcement with Gene. I also want to thank again Gene for coming to our meetings, for showing up, telling us who he was, and for agreeing to make that movie for us. So we will have that now in our historical records for Tamoy. So thank you. Next up, again, Commissioner Winnick and Commissioner Bigby is the affordable housing.
Thank you. Arnie, why don't I begin, and then we can go from the micro to the macro. We can talk about some of the current issues and where we are. The Commission will recall that at our last meeting, a committee was appointed to study and deal with, from a human rights perspective, human relations perspective, affordable housing in the city of Edina. The committee consists of student members Nicole Gates and Katrina Weinert, to my left and right, respectively, and myself, and the committee membership is open to any other member of the Commission who wishes to serve. There are two significant current issues presently before the City Council, which I will discuss briefly. The first, of course, is 66 West, and to give you an update on what's happened with that project, which is the homeless and at-risk young adult project, to be located in the former Twin City Federal Building on 66th Street, just west of Xerxes. Preliminary approval was received by the Council. The project was to go forward to seek funding through the Minnesota Housing Finance Agency, and lo and behold, litigation was commenced to stop the project. The litigation was started by a group of anonymous citizens. The only named plaintiff was an attorney with the Larkin Hoffman firm. The others have decided not to identify themselves. There is speculation in the community that they may very well have been one or more of the speakers who spoke in opposition at both the Planning Commission and the City Council meeting. The city's response was to file a motion to dismiss the action as being premature, since final approval has not yet been received, merely preliminary approval. And we're informed today that that motion is still pending, so there's nothing further other than the complaint that's been filed and the city's response denying. So on that one, there's not much more update that we can give you. The project, just to refresh your recollection, is for at-risk youth, formerly at-risk youth, 18 years and older. Beacon Associates, which has a similar project in South Minneapolis, is the sponsor of the project. Overwhelming support was received from the faith community, clergy leadership from the major Protestant denominations located here in Edina, as well as the Catholic Church, spoke in favor, as did many leaders in the community, including Edina Housing Foundation, including former city council members, any number of people from both the school committee and the community. The police chief spoke in support of the project after having visited with the precinct person at the precinct where a similar project in South Minneapolis is located, the conclusion being no increase in crime by virtue of young adults, 18 years and older, first apartments, many of them having just completed foster care, others having been released from Hennepin County Youth Detention Services. So that project is proceeding, and to refresh the Commission, we did render our very strong statement in support of that project, and that is a part of the record. Which brings us to the second project. The second project, for which our committee is unanimously recommending we again support by a very strong statement, is the project located at 72nd and France Avenue. Our support is needed in this one, as is our support needed in 66 West, in large part because of our mission. Our mission vis-a-vis affordable housing is obviously securing for all residents Edina freedom from discrimination, and the code requires that our commission advise the council on matters relating to discrimination, human relations, and that includes housing, real property, public accommodation, public services, and the rest. We are also required to implement programs of education and community action designed to effectuate that policy, and which have been approved by the council. obviously the benefits of a multi-layered community with residents from various ethnic, religious, racial composition speaks for itself, hopefully, but it doesn't. And there continue to be those who resist change, people who are fearful, as evidenced by the comments that were shown on Channel 16 during the public hearings previously, and as also stated most recently in today's issue of the Edina Sun Current, where a letter to the editor stated, and I quote, another thing that may come up, the 72nd and France apartment building. Think of the people in the Cornelia School area. It could be your neighborhood next, close quote. That was published today. So, many benefits for this commission to go forward with another statement of support of this project. The developer on this project is Boisclair Corporation, led by Laura Boisclair. Boisclair has been in the development business for over 40 years. It's a woman-owned business. Not only do they develop real estate all across the metro area, the state, and the region, but in particular, affordable housing is one of their strong suits. They have developed and managed units themselves. It includes over 500 affordable housing rental units in Bloomington, 300 in the Brooklyn Park, New Hope area, and approximately 80 in White Bear Lake, St. Paul, and Rosemont. With the addition of these 32 units, which is 20% of the total rental units in this project, that is the Met Council guideline. Previous Edina rental apartment developments in recent years have been either 0 or 10%. As has been pointed out in the materials handed out to you, right now we have new developments without subsidized or affordable housing, including the Southdale parking lot project, 232 units. No plan unit development was required, no substantial zoning changes on that one, so the city really didn't have leverage. However, that's not the case with the Wicks property, the Lennar development over on Xerxes, or Byerly's development with 256 rental units. There, the city just elected not to pursue affordable housing. In this case, as a part of the requested zoning change and Edina Comprehensive Plan Amendment, the Boisclair Corporation does propose to meet those guidelines of 20%, and that would mean that that there would be, assuming passage and completion of the 66 West project, with several others for seniors, there would be 90 or so additional housing units. This is not the first mixed development in Edina. 30 years ago, Oak Glen on Cahill Road was established, and that project has moved along. Oak Glen residents are a part of our community for those 30 years. 38 market rate units and 26 subsidized units on Cahill Road, south of West 70th Street, right in the midst of some very high-end market townhomes, including a Ron Clark development, and adjacent to Lewis Park. This project on France Avenue will have the advantages, obviously, of sidewalks, Arnie, of transit, bus lines, of employment opportunities for entry-level people in the new Fairview Southdale Medical District, the medical office building, Southdale, all the businesses along France Avenue, the presence of a neighborhood school, Cornelia School, which right now does house approximately 25 to 30% of its population being minority students. Ironically, interestingly, the second most minority student population of schools is Creek Valley School, in large part because of the Oak Glen residents and the market rate apartment housing and townhomes along West 70th Street. So I believe this fits. Our committee believes this fits. We have drafted for your consideration a statement in support, quite similar to the statement in support that we did last time, but perhaps a bit more forceful because of the 20% that is being offered here. We would hope this would signal to other real estate developers of the direction that Edina now hopes to lead. So for those reasons, perhaps I would start things off, Madam Chair, by making a motion to approve the adoption of the statement in support of the 7200 France development.
Is there
I second that.
any further discussion?
I have a question for you, Steve, and that is, what was the Planning Commission's recommendation or opinion or conclusion about this project?
The Planning Commission recommended disapproval of the project on the basis of zoning density, which really they had nothing to do with the human rights, human relations aspects of it, and they did not specifically address the issue of affordable housing in the denial. The City Council acted otherwise.
I have just a procedural question. So you just said the City Council acted otherwise. So would you just outline what the steps would be ultimately to try to get this approved, to try to get this unit approved with this section of affordable housing approved?
At its last City Council meeting, my understanding, and I wasn't there, this is just from city staff, and Lindy, please correct me if I'm wrong. My understanding is that the matter was placed on the agenda even though the Planning Commission had voted no, and the City Council signaled that it would hear the matter for preliminary approval at its December 16 meeting, the meeting coming up next week. That's the reason for the urgency on this. If this is to be included in the support package from staff, then we have to consider it and pass it tonight so it can be included in their packet to be delivered tomorrow.
Any other questions?
I just
Okay.
have a quick comment. After watching part of that meeting, the last City Council meeting on this topic, I believe what the ultimate outcome is that the builder or the developer is coming back with sort of a somewhat modified plan from what was presented last time. Is that correct? Is that your understanding? Okay, I think they were making some changes. I think the biggest thing might have been the height issue, to the best of my recollection.
I think that's right. We spoke with the developer today, and we were assured there will be no changes made in the 20% units as affordable housing. Those have to do with other issues not related to the business of our mission.
Okay, in that case, all those in favor of the statement of support for the 7200 France development, say aye.
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 All those opposed, say nay. Motion carried. Thank you, Commissioner Winnick.
Madam Chair, I just want to make a few comments about
Sure.
affordable housing, if I can.
Before you do, I abstained from the vote. You didn't ask for anyone who's abstaining.
I said all those in favor, all those opposed, say nay. Oh, I'm sorry.
I abstained.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Just for
Okay.
the record, because I don't feel as though we have enough information as a commission to vote tonight. So I
Okay.
just wanted the record to reflect that.
Thank you. So for the record, we have one abstention. Thank you. Barney?
Well, as a commission member who's going to be nearing the end of his second three-year term here soon, I just want to be able to make a few comments, but especially about affordable housing. I want to thank all the members on this commission, both present and the ones past since I've been serving, for their work to make Edina a premier city as it relates to our human rights work. And I think for the most part, we've had just great support from our elected leaders and the staff here in the city of Edina. They've been tireless and always supportive. They've taken a lot of flack about things that have sometimes not been so popular, but we know have been the right thing for us to do. When I had an opportunity to be chair of this commission, the one thing that I thought was really important is have a bit of a byline. My byline was that this should be a community, the community I live in, where everyone is accepted and respected and has full participation. And I still cling to that purpose today. And with affordable housing, it's really important. It's been a part of my personal experience in my life to have experienced affordable housing, and it really did a tremendous amount for my family to provide us with a place to live without having to worry about having shelter. And so for Edina, the future economic vitality of our city demands that affordable housing be available. It sustains working families as they transition into the middle class in our country. Edina is one of the many communities in Minnesota that share this responsibility with others: Minneapolis, Duluth, Brooklyn Center, Eden Prairie, St. Louis Park, all of those. Literally every other city in the state of Minnesota. The Availability of affordable housing can put families on a trajectory to economic success with a very modest investment on the part of communities, an investment that will garner a substantial return. The need is for a home that's count-onable for a family, and that's been really a significant factor for us to see during the times of recent financial turndown over the past 6 years. Edina can provide affordable housing that's close to good jobs. Steve was talking about this. Great schools, retail and grocery stores, and a variety of transit options. Really important for people needing employment as well as housing. And I'm proposing, really, that our commission encourage the city, through our elected leadership, to take a visible leadership role in affordable housing for the state of Minnesota. That this is an opportunity for our community to reignite the interest in and support of affordable housing throughout the entire state. Just as Edina's leadership on earlier issues, domestic partnership being one of them, has invited other communities to join in our work and really caused a lot of, I think, inspiration on the part of others. So it's imperative, I think, that Edina pursue a consistent annual program of additions to affordable housing that will improve and enhance our community in support of the Vision Edina initiative that's currently underway in Edina. So thank you.
Commissioner Bigby, thank you very much. Next up is correspondence and petition, and if I remember, we have a lot of correspondence in our packets. Are there any thoughts or comments from us regarding the comments in our packet? Just as a start out, I happen to have one, by the way. I noticed in the packet, one of the comments were made that when the Washington football's information came up at City Council, the person indicated that our commissioners were not there at the meeting, and I know that several of us were at that meeting. So part of the process is when City Council is discussing the topic, they are discussing it. Unless they ask for information from us, we don't provide it. So we were there. In the comments here, it stated that we did not even show up. So we do show up when our provisions or projects are coming up in front of City Council. Just wanted that out there. So again, we did have a lot of comments in here from residents. Any comments from us? No. Okay, in that case, we'll move on. Next is Chair, Commission Member, and Student Member comments. I'm up. The first one is, in the last, I'd say, 2 months, we've had 2 incidences related to our bias offense and response plan. As you know, we updated that in the last month, and I think because we've updated it, the Edina Police Department are following it. So when they had these 2 incidences, they called a meeting with Scott Neal, Chief Nelson, and myself to review the 2 incidences. Both of them are on file with the police department. When the police responded to the residences, they responded immediately. One was markings on the side of a bridge at Bredeston Park. The police came out, talked to the person. The person was running by and saw it. What the police did is they quickly spray painted, covered over it so it wouldn't offend anybody else, and contacted Bredeston Park. That was the first one. The second one was in the backyard where there are several houses. There's a pond, and in the pond, somebody wrote disparaging remarks in the pond. Again, that's sort of an easy one. It was ice and snow, and they wrote in that. Again, the police came out. The residents said, no, they didn't feel the remarks were about them, but the police did cover it up, and they filed a report. So what's important is because of our bias offense plan, they have filed the reports. They are keeping them so that when others come up, they now have a pattern, and they are working with us, the Human Rights and Relations Commission. So it was an honor to work with them and to make sure that this is being monitored. So any thoughts or questions on that one? Okay. Next up is Commissioner Arsenal.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to give a report to this body. As the HRC rep to the Human Services Task Force, I wanted to report that the task force has completed its work. The charge of the task force was to review funding requests by human services providers who address human rights and relations needs for Edina residents, and to make a recommendation to the council on funding. For 2015, the council budgeted $86,300 for the human services funding, which was about the same as last year. It was an increase of about 2% over the 2014 funding. The task force received and reviewed proposals from 8 providers, and these were the same 8 providers who received funding or who are receiving funding for 2014. We met with each one of the providers for kind of a Q&A, and then we met again to make our determination on recommendation. The task force recommended basically the same level of funding for 2015 as these providers received in 2014, with the exception that we increased by about 20% the funding, our recommendation for the funding for Oasis for Youth. And that's an organization that provides support for homeless and precariously housed youth in Edina. And the task force felt that this was really needed. We were sort of recognizing what appears to be really a growing need to support youth in crisis in our community. And the City Council adopted the task force recommendation at their December 2nd meeting. They adopted it as it was recommended by the task force for the funding for 2015. And if I could just, on a final note, put in a plug to this committee, if you would, to encourage this committee in future to provide a representative to participate on this task force, because I think the work is important in that they review funding for these for human services to residents of Edina and largely to vulnerable populations in Edina.
And Pat, you're mentioning that because you've been doing this for 2 years.
I've been doing it for 2 years, and I may step down,
right,
and looking for a volunteer in future.
Right. That's why you mentioned that. Okay. Thank you. I see right now, unless the next one up that I have here is Student Commissioner Gates.
More specifically, asexuality, bisexuality, pansexuality, and others that are lesser known. Generally, pansexuality means that there is no change, like you fall in love with people regardless of their gender. Bisexuality generally means male or female. Asexuality means you have no desire for romantic relationships at all. And these are generally not as well known for older people. They're generally new terms. In fact, I don't think asexuality ever came up before the 2000s perhaps. But so what I did for an action for this was I went to a meeting with the Gay Straight Alliance Club at Edina High School, where so I could ask them about any action they have taken to address asexuality, as that is my main focus. The response to my question was how they have talked about asexuality, education, told others about what it is, what it means in detail, as it is an umbrella term. And the day I went, they also had a similar discussion on bisexuality. So, and also in terms of their action, they also fight to ensure that the A in the acronym LGBTQA stands for allies, or does not stand for allies, and stands for asexuals.
Nicole, thank you for presenting that and also for connecting with Edina High School for that. Thank you. I also have next up Commissioner Weinert.
Thank you. I will be talking about human trafficking and how it relates to our commission. This October, Hennepin County fully implemented its No Wrong Door policy to help give resources and safe harbor to victims of human trafficking. And I believe that Edina, as a city and as a community, must also address human trafficking and can take measures in raising awareness in our community. It's a significant problem in Minnesota, as the Twin Cities has been identified as one of the 13th largest human trafficking centers in the United States. In terms of action, I'm hopeful that we can work with the community to hold events, which would include speakers from local and state organizations. It is also important to involve the youth in Edina in discussion of human trafficking, as there are many relevant student clubs and organizations, such as, for example, at Edina High School, where personally I am part of the Against Modern Day Slavery Club at Edina High School. And these student members could work with the commission to discuss human trafficking and put on these events. In my opinion, it is important as a first step to raise awareness in the issue of human trafficking, as It is important to include the public and educating government officials, including law enforcement, as well as general community members. And tentatively, we hope to plan events scheduled in March of 2015, which would take place in a community location, and we would encourage all community members to attend, including youth, as well as other community members. And it is important to realize that modern-day slavery does exist today in our society and here in Minnesota, and involves people here right in Edina. And as a community, I believe that we can combat human trafficking as a community, and that this issue does concern the Human Rights and Relations Commission. Thank you.
Commissioner Weiner, thank you very much. For Commissioner comments now, are there others? Commissioner Bigby?
Just to comment about these two most recent presentations, I think there are some outside organizations out front Minnesota, the Advocates for Human Rights, that would be just great resources and possibly another opportunity for partnering on these issues. They're very important issues for us.
Thank you. Commissioner Sanders? Okay. Commissioner Kennedy?
Just to follow up on the Universal Declaration of Human Rights issues that Christy Nickerson spoke about, I want to commend the work of past members of the Edina Human Rights and Relations Commission for focusing on different populations within our own community. And I'm thinking specifically of the Domestic Partner Ordinance that was passed recently about the annual observance of genocide awareness that happens every spring, and about the stand that has been taken to address issues of discrimination against Indigenous people. So I applaud past commission members who have worked on this, and I look forward to this commission continuing this work.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Winnick, yes, Winnick, is it passed? Okay. We now have staff comments. Okay, no staff comments this time. One last thing, in that case, our next HRC meeting will be Tuesday, January 27th at 7 p.m. In that case, I thank you all, and I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Motion carried. Thank you very much.